Hello everyone, welcome back to the podcast. Next week, I'm going to get Jarred, my partner, onto the podcast with me to answer some questions and speak to our relationship. And I thought this week it would be a good idea to do a little bit of story time and to give some context to our relationship. We've been together for nearly 10 years, and relationship is something that I'm really, really passionate about, whether it's with one other intimate partner or with a community or with ourselves. Everything's relationship. Everything requires us to upskill in communication and awareness and even things like passion and purpose. And for me, relationship it's been, in my experience, one of the most meaningful and powerful and transformational spiritual practices. And it has all three parts it relates to all three parts of our spiritual practice. So there's a deep healing that's both required and facilitated to be in relationship. And there's a cultivation process. It's a craft. Something that we are inspired by and motivated towards and drawn to is to be in a beautiful, harmonious, fulfilling relationship. So when we aspire to something like that, it's a cultivation process. And also in my experience, my relationship has been one of the most beautiful forms of accessing the awakening part of spirituality. So the mysticism, the energy, the devotion and love that can be experienced in the heart. So using our loved one as a way of opening us up to the spiritual heart and to our being. So using them as a tool or as a stepping stone to something far, far beyond, as well as the mystical dimensions of love being opened up by being with this other person. So this person is somehow triggering and opening us up to love and our being in a way that isn't taking us away from the person. And they're not just a stepping stone, but we're meeting them in the moment with such a deep presence and with such an open heart. And that can definitely be facilitated through our significant other relationship. And so I've always been passionate about relationship. I think in my earlier days as a teacher, I used to speak to my relationship a lot more and used to teach some of the Tantra curriculum, the Neo-Tantra curriculum of my former schools. But then it's been a long time since I've really spoken about relationship and my relationship. As a teacher, taking that position very seriously, the things that are shared as a teacher are not just the same content that is shared between friends. There's a extra responsibility when sharing things as a teacher. And I've been in a process with my relationship. Still inspired, still having, little wins and successes and insights that, sometimes I do share little bits, but I've been reluctant to comment too heavily on my experience of my relationship because it's still been in a certain phase of a process. And now Jarred and I are kind of coming out the other side of one phase and into another as we step into being parents. And that other phase, the phase we've been in for many years, has ended quite abruptly, and this new phase has started, and it's actually many things about the previous stage. I hope this is not all too cryptic, but many things about our relationship have become very clear to me now that we are transitioning into the next stage of our relationship. And I'd love to, now that I have so much hindsight, I'd love to share more about that. So that's one of the reasons Jarred is going to come onto the podcast and we'll have a chat together. But I thought today I could offer some context just to give a little storyline. So yeah, buckle up and enjoy the story of Jarred and my relationship, at least in brief, just to give you a timeline. So we met almost 10 years ago at Jarred's naturopathy college. So just down in Jandakot. And some of you know us from that time. He had just exited the mines. He had been working in the mines for 5 years since he was 18. And he had just bought a house around the corner from this naturopathy college, and he wanted to study herbal medicine, which, just thinking about this young man at 22, it's just so inspiring. He was a really inspiring, young man at 22, and was committed to healing people and to healing himself and to health and wellness, whatever that meant at 22. Which, is obviously very different from how we understand those fields now, him and I. So he had just started his naturopathy degree. He stopped the mines in December and had started his degree in January. And in January of that year, I think it was 2013, I had just come home from being in Thailand, and I had just moved in maybe 3 kilometers down the road from Jarred, and I had gotten a job at his naturopathy college teaching yoga and also giving like a yoga elective in their curriculum. And I was also 22, and I had been in Thailand. I'd just come home from my second season there. So I had been participating in the yoga school in Thailand, and in the second season I had already started teaching. So I had done the teacher training course, even gone to their India branch and was teaching there, and then had already started to gain a lot of confidence in myself as a teacher. And this is just a side note for any budding yoga teachers out there who really want to teach at a certain studio or place. You really just have to hang around there long enough and express your interest to teach and participate in that community, and soon you'll be given some opportunity there. So I was like this super confident, know-it-all 22-year-old yoga teacher. And Jarred and I met there on the first Friday of his school week, and I was giving a yoga class, and he rocked up a little bit late. And, we made note of each other as he walked into the class a little bit late, and I gave him my mat. And every Friday in that yoga class, we would have like a little chat after class, and, we couldn't wait to see each other again. And so from the moment that Jarred and I met, it was fireworks. It was chemistry. And within weeks, we had fallen madly in love with each other. Anyone close to us knew about the other person and about this love interest we had. And we went on dates and we became a couple. And yeah, we got very close very quickly, and there was an intensity to it. And looking back, relationship meant a lot to both of us. Like I, try to think about why was it so intense, and why did we have the start we did, and why have we had the relationship we've had compared to other people's, where of course you sometimes know what goes on behind closed doors, and sometimes you don't know. Being very close to many people, I get a very good insight to what the behind the scenes is of many relationships. But something that was significant in ours was the intensity, and I think for us, the other one really filled a hole. We really yearned for the other one before they came into our lives. I yearned so much for that partnership, and I always knew what I wanted. I had always wanted a certain type of relationship. And Jarred as well, I can't speak for him right now, but he also had a clear idea and yearned for a certain type of relationship. You know, he had also experienced heartbreak and relationships not rising up to his standards. So actually, before we met, he had just made a commitment to, you know, stop pursuing relationship and to focus entirely on himself. You know, next week he had met me, and that went out the door. And I always have, you know, during our relationship, thought back to that time that, you know, he really wanted that alone time to grow and to do his own thing the same way that I kind of had been doing. But instead he had fell into a really intense relationship with me that has, you know, lasted this long time. And I was actually only meant to be in Perth for 6 months. I'd come home to finish my university degree, and then I was scheduled to go to Mexico. So I was only there for 6 months, but Jarred and I formed such an intense relationship. For the next few years, we carried on together and we engaged in long distance relationship. And I mean, already when I was living in Perth, we had moved in together, and things were quite intense, and there was a lot to navigate. Already so much challenge and intensity had arisen in those first 6 months. We've always had our honeymoon period and our, you know, long-term marriage energy period kind of alongside each other. There was never a distinct honeymoon period that didn't have the intensity of both of our materials. We were kind of dove into it right away. And yeah, there had been a lot for us to navigate. So we navigated long distance. We tried open relationship. But I think because our relationship has been really challenging, and I think it's been the hardest for me, way more challenging for me than for Jarred. And I think this is the case for women in general. I just heard a stat the other day. I can't remember what it is because my brain is so porous these days, but it was a percentage of how many women initiate divorce. So it's much more the case that women initiate divorce than men. And, you know, women are much more sensitive to, we have a much larger relational awareness. The relating part of our brain is much bigger. We also have a lot of fantasies as well, you know, stacked up about what we would like our relationship to be. And the reality is that a lot of relationships don't have the foundation, the education, the resources, the support, the skills, the knowledge to be harmonious and successful. And that's a fact. And then women are much more sensitive to that. So I think it was hardest for me, but our relationship has always been challenging and has a lot of the times been really hard. And I've always wondered why, you know, what are the factors? Because I do see other relationships have challenges, but a lot of them don't feel as hard or as intense as ours did. And I think there's a couple of factors. One of them is that we were really young when we got together. And we both, but I'll speak especially for me, had really high standards and a really high vision of what I wanted the relationship to be. And I was sensitive to all the places where it wasn't that, which was like every place. I didn't have the training, the experience, like the modeling, the conditioning, the codes, the nervous system for this vision of a relationship. And I always knew what I wanted. I just didn't realize how long it would take and what all the obstacles would be to get there. But I knew what I wanted, and I knew I was destined for it, and I knew I would get there. But I think the hard part was that I didn't know how or how long it would take to get there. And then on top of that, Jarred and I both have a lot, especially at 22, we had a lot of healing to do, a lot of trauma to work through. And, it was like we were navigating it from scratch. Yes, we had both had so much teachings already. He had been exposed to teachings. I had been exposed to many teachings. But that doesn't necessarily mean that we were skilled. We had been exposed to teachings and teachers. But with any kind of knowledge, you get better at learning. When you first engage with teachings, I recommend to listen to the last episode about the different stages of spiritual seeking, because when we first engage with the teachings, it's just an exposure, and we are not able to sift through and find what parts of the teachings are good. There are so many teachings that are bad. There are so many teachings that if we were to blindly adopt them, they would actually cause us the opposite effect of what we are looking for. So I think for me, and because I'm quite critical with myself, not in a mean way to myself, but can be very critical to see where did I kind of go wrong. And I feel like at the beginning of our relationship, it was also at the beginning of my spiritual path, and I had so many teachings, and I forced a lot of them upon Jarred, and we were both trying to adopt teachings without having the maturity to see what was actually going to be beneficial and relevant for us. So we put in so much effort, but we put in so much effort at the beginning into our relationship and into our healing and into our spirituality, but it didn't provide that much yield. And now we put so much less effort into our relationship. Like back then, we were doing everything, like all kinds of different meditation and sexual and learning and emotional practices continuously, all the time, really intensely, but it didn't provide that much yield. And now we do much less because we're older and have more responsibilities, and the ratio of the yield is so much higher. If we put in 100 points of energy, we'll probably get 95 points back of benefit, where previously we'd put in 100 points of energy and get like 10 points of benefit back, which is just not a good rate of return. So I really put it down to us being young and not having the right tools yet to navigate the tools, which is so important. There was so much trial and error. So as I was learning how to be a spiritual practitioner and how to be a woman and how to be an adult and how to heal and how to communicate and how to love, I was also learning that with Jarred, and it was like this battlefield. But that fireworks and that chemistry and that madness of being in love with each other has never gone away. It's definitely gotten covered up a lot with the intensity and the pain and the challenges of our relationship. But there has always been a deep love that is both chemistry and biological, but something also that I've spent so much time cultivating to keep my heart open and to use this person as a pathway to the deepest love of my being, something that I can't access myself. So there's always been this strong bond and strong connection. And then moving forward, we both opened up our own businesses back in 2015. And as I was trying to navigate our relationship, I kept finding benefit in stepping back. So I spent, I'd be in a challenge and I'd find I actually need to step back. I'm actually controlling this too much. So for the past maybe 7 years, a lot of my lessons have actually been stepping back, especially when the first part of a relationship was so much about me and us stepping in and doing more and putting in all of this effort. There was this benefit to stepping back and to actually giving Jarred the space to be in his own process. Because, like I said, we were learning how to be ourselves, and we were trying to learn how to be excellent in relationship at the same time. And it's actually really, really hard to do that, especially if you want to do them both so well and so quickly. So I just found this benefit, especially internally for myself, to give him the space to be his own person. And that's really hard because I really wanted to move forward in being in relationship together. And especially when I really found my own groove in my businesses and in my life and in my passion and in my purpose and who I am. And I started to get really, really clear and really started to heal myself. And I kind of wanted to move forward into, okay, now let's start to relate together in an incredible way. And actually what Jarred needed, he just has a different process. And it's taken a long time for me to realize that he had a different process and to respect it and support it, but also keep him inspired as well. So that has always been really challenging to navigate. And that's this last kind of phase that we've been in for the past 7 years as we've both navigated our businesses and navigated our own personal growth and personal journey. And I'll leave some space for Jarred to share about what it's been like for him, this journey over the past 10 years, and also what it's been like for him to step into his own personal experience of growing into the man that he is and the man that he's growing into. So I'll leave some space for that and for him to speak to that. And then next, we want to share hindsight. Now, looking back, we're now in this incredible place where we're both ready to engage in the relationship. I've been, quote unquote, ready for a long period of time now, but being actually ready or just being eager are two different things as well. So, there's a bit of both of those. And Jarred's been ready, getting more ready, but maybe not as eager because his priority has been more on his own personal journey and his personal circumstances, including his work and what has been moving for him through his business. But now we're in this position where whether we're ready or whether we're eager doesn't matter, and we're 100% committed to now engaging in being in relationship with each other. Wasn't a conscious decision. It happened like that with the snap of the finger, finding out that I'm pregnant, and it is just the perfect time. The only time, the necessary thing is to turn our focuses fully to being in relationship together and to cultivating that. Like I said at the beginning, relationship has always meant so much to both of us. We've just had different processes of engaging with it. So I hope that has warmed you up to the conversation that you'll be hearing in the next 7 to 10 days or so with Jarred and I. And if you have any questions for us, please let us know. We'd love to answer them. And the conversation with Jarred and I on the podcast will be ongoing as well, because I think there's a lot to share. We've navigated so much, and I would love for you to get in behind the scenes and take anything valuable that you can from it. Thank you so much for listening to the episode. Make sure you're subscribed to the podcast so that you don't miss when the new episodes come out. And I hope you're still engaged with your meditation practice. There's a meditation that we publish every single week, and they are so amazing. So I hope you can listen to those too. And make sure you also follow us on socials so you can get in touch and let us know your questions that you have for us and your feedback. Looking forward to hearing from you. Take care. Thank you for tuning in to the Functional Spirituality Podcast. If you enjoyed the show, make sure you subscribe by pressing the plus button on iTunes or the following button on Spotify. This is going to ensure that this resource is available and top of mind when you most need it. So please subscribe now.